September 1939. Hitler's war machine crashes across the Polish border with unprecedented fury. As Warsaw burns and armies collapse, a small fortress on the Narew River becomes the stage for impossible heroism. 720 Polish soldiers, led by a captain who knows he's marching to his death, prepare to face 40,000 German troops. At 4:45 a.m. on September 1st, 1939, the world changed forever. German dive bombers screamed out of the dawn sky, while 1.5 million Wehrmacht soldiers poured across the Polish frontier. This wasn't just another European border skirmish. This was Blitzkrieg, lightning war, a terrifying new form of warfare that combined tanks, aircraft, and motorized infantry in devastating coordination. The Luftwaffe struck first, destroying Polish airfields before most pilots could even reach their planes. Entire squadrons of fighters and bombers were obliterated on the ground, caught like sitting ducks in the pre-dawn darkness. Within hours, Poland's air force had virtually ceased to exist. Then came the tanks. Hundreds of German panzers rolled across the frontier in massive columns, their steel tracks crushing everything in their path. Behind them marched the infantry, grey uniformed soldiers carrying the confidence of a force that had never known defeat. Polish border guards, armed with rifles and courage, held their posts as long as humanly possible. At Westerplatte, a tiny garrison of 182 men faced a German battleship and held for 7 days. At Mokra, Polish cavalry charged German tanks and somehow won, but these were desperate heroics, not strategic victories. For every Polish success, a dozen Polish units were encircled, overwhelmed, or simply vanished under the weight of German firepower. Poland, caught between Nazi Germany and Stalin's Soviet Union, faced annihilation. Within hours, Polish airfields were smoking ruins. Within days, entire armies were encircled and destroyed. The speed was breathtaking, the devastation absolute. While the world watched in stunned silence, Hitler's war machine carved through Polish defenses like a blade through paper. But wars aren't won by machines alone. They're won by the hearts of the men who must face them. And in a small fortress on the Narew River, 150 miles northeast of Warsaw, one Polish officer was about to prove that courage could still matter in the age of steel and fire. The Narew River line was Poland's last hope. If the Germans broke through here, the road to Warsaw lay wide open. The fortress of Wizna, built during World War I, sat astride this critical waterway like an ancient guardian. Its concrete bunkers and earthworks had been designed to stop the armies of 1918, not the mechanized monsters of 1939. But it was all Poland had left. Captain Władysław Raganis knew exactly what he was being asked to do. This wasn't a strategic withdrawal or a fighting retreat. This was a sacrifice. A 32-year-old professional soldier with 15 years of service, Raganis had dedicated his life to duty, honor, and the defense of his homeland. He had fought in the Polish-Soviet War of 1920, where he learned that sometimes the impossible could become possible through sheer force of will. He had served in garrison duty, training young recruits and instilling in them the values that made a soldier more than just a man with a gun. Now, as German panzers rolled toward the Narew, he received the order that would define his legacy and cost him his life. The order came by radio from Polish High Command, crackling through the static with devastating clarity. Hold the line at Wizna, at all costs, for as long as possible. No reinforcements were coming. No relief was planned. Raganis understood immediately. This wasn't a military operation. This was a heroic gesture, a statement that Poland would not go quietly into the night. Raganis gathered his officers in the fortress command bunker. The concrete walls, thick enough to stop artillery shells, suddenly felt thin as paper. Outside, they could hear the distant rumble of German armor growing closer. Inside, 720 Polish soldiers prepared to face the impossible. These weren't elite troops or hand-picked volunteers. They were ordinary Polish soldiers who had found themselves in an extraordinary situation. There was Lieutenant Jan Skoczynski, a mathematics teacher from Białystok who had trained with the Reserve Officers Corps during university summers. Sergeant Major Joseph Meller, a career non-commissioned officer who had served in the Austrian army during the Great War and knew more about military engineering than most officers. Private Stefan Kowalski, barely 18 years old, clutching a rifle older than he was and trying not to show his fear. "Gentlemen," Regini said, his voice steady and calm, "we are not here to survive. We are here to buy time with our lives. Every hour we hold, every German we stop, brings our country closer to salvation." His men understood. They were regulars from the 135th Infantry Regiment, reinforced by reservists and local volunteers. Some carried modern rifles. Others had weapons left over from the Great War. A few clutched hunting rifles and shotguns. Against the Wehrmacht's modern arsenal, they might as well have been armed with swords. The contrast was stark and brutal. The Germans approached with Panzer I and II tanks, mobile artillery pieces, motorized infantry carriers, and air support on call. The Poles had concrete bunkers, barbed wire, a handful of anti-tank rifles, and determination. It should have been no contest. On paper, it wasn't even a fair fight. But they had something the Germans didn't expect. They had a leader who would rather die than retreat, and the unbreakable bond that forms when good men decide to stand together against impossible odds. The fortress itself was a relic of another war. 17 concrete bunkers connected by trenches and communication tunnels, designed to control the river crossing and the vital roads beyond. The bunkers were well built but old, their fields of fire calculated for the slow infantry attacks of 1918, not the combined arms assaults of 1939. Each bunker was a small concrete fortress in its own right, with walls 3 feet thick and steel-reinforced observation ports. They had been positioned to create overlapping fields of fire across the river approaches, with communication trenches allowing the garrison to move between positions under cover. The main armament consisted of machine guns, mortars, and a few small artillery pieces, effective against infantry, questionable against tanks, and utterly inadequate against the force approaching from the south. Regini's positioned his men carefully, machine gun nests in the forward bunkers, riflemen in concealed positions, artillery observers with their obsolete radios. He placed his best marksmen in the bunkers with the clearest fields of fire, positioning anti-tank weapons where they might actually do some good. He knew the Germans would come with overwhelming force. His only advantage was that they wouldn't expect serious resistance from what looked like an abandoned frontier post. The morning of September 7th brought the sound every defender dreaded, the deep rumble of tank engines, growing steadily louder. Through his binoculars, Regini's watched the lead elements of German 11th Panzer Corps emerge from the forest. Tanks, armored cars, motorized infantry, all moving with the confident precision of a force that had crushed every enemy in its path. This wasn't just any German unit. Line X Panzer Corps was commanded by General Heinz Guderian himself, the architect of Blitzkrieg warfare and one of Germany's most brilliant tank commanders. Guderian had revolutionized military tactics, proving that tanks weren't just mobile artillery, but the spearhead of a completely new form of warfare. His corps had spearheaded the invasion of Poland, smashing through defensive lines that were supposed to hold for weeks. If you're amazed by these incredible stories of courage against impossible odds, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. History's greatest heroes deserve to have their stories told, and your support helps us bring you more of these incredible tales every week. General Heinz Guderian, the architect of Blitzkrieg himself, commanded this massive force. Over 40,000 men, hundreds of tanks, motorized artillery, and air support. They had steamrolled across Poland for a week, meeting only scattered resistance. The small fortress ahead looked like a minor speed bump on the road to Warsaw. Guderian's reputation was built on speed and shock. His panzer divisions had broken through the Ardennes in 1940, crushed French resistance in 6 weeks, and would soon drive to the gates of Moscow. He was a military genius who understood that modern warfare was about momentum, about hitting the enemy so hard and so fast that they couldn't recover. The idea that a few hundred Polish soldiers in an obsolete fortress could slow his advance was almost insulting. But when the first German reconnaissance units approached the river, something unexpected happened. Polish rifles cracked from concealed positions. Machine guns chattered from bunkers the Germans hadn't even seen. The lead vehicles exploded in smoke and flame. The German advance scout, a young lieutenant confident in his superiority, suddenly found his armored car surrounded by impacts. Polish marksmen, hidden in camouflaged positions, were picking off his men with deadly accuracy. The reconnaissance turned into a bloody retreat as German vehicles burned along the riverbank. Guderian was annoyed but not concerned. A few Polish holdouts with obsolete weapons. His tanks would crush them in minutes. He ordered a direct assault. What followed shattered every German assumption about Polish collapse. The fortress bunkers, invisible until they opened fire, poured devastating volleys into the advancing Germans. Polish marksmen, fighting for their homeland, picked off German officers with deadly precision. Tank after tank ground to a halt, struck by anti-tank weapons the intelligence reports swore the Poles didn't possess. The German assault stalled, then it stopped, then it retreated, leaving dozens of smoking vehicles and hundreds of casualties scattered across the approaches to Wizna. For the first time since the invasion began, the unstoppable Wehrmacht had been stopped. Ragini's moved through his positions, checking on his men, coordinating the defense. In Bunker 7, he found Sergeant Meller calmly directing machine gun fire while concrete dust fell around him like snow. In the communications trench, Lieutenant Skoczynski was coordinating artillery strikes with the precision of a mathematics professor solving equations. These weren't the panicked, demoralized troops German intelligence had described. These were soldiers fighting for their homeland with the fury of cornered wolves. He knew this was just the beginning. The Germans would be back with more tanks, more artillery, more everything. But for now, for this moment, 720 Polish soldiers had done the impossible. They had made the conquerors bleed. September 8th brought the full weight of German fury. Guderian, his reputation on the line, unleashed everything. Heavy artillery pounded the fortress for hours, trying to collapse the bunkers through sheer weight of explosive. Stuka dive bombers shrieked down from the sky, their sirens adding terror to destruction. The earth shook. Concrete cracked. Men died. The artillery barrage was unlike anything the Poles had experienced. German 150 mm howitzers, the same guns that had reduced Belgian forts to rubble, fired round after round into the fortress. Each explosion sent shockwaves through the ground, rattling teeth and stopping hearts. In the bunkers, men pressed themselves against walls as concrete fragments filled the air like deadly snow. But the fortress held. Polish gunners, half buried in rubble, continued to serve their weapons. Machine gunners, blood running from their ears from the concussion, kept their guns chattering at the advancing Germans. Ragini's, his uniform torn and dusty, moved from bunker to bunker, encouraging his men, directing fire, refusing every German demand for surrender. In the chaos, individual acts of heroism emerged. Private Kowalski, the 18-year-old farmer's son, single-handedly destroyed a German tank with an anti-tank rifle, then held his position until German infantry overran his bunker. He was found 3 days later, surrounded by empty cartridge cases, his rifle still gripped in his hands. Sergeant Meller, the old Austrian veteran, kept his machine gun firing even after German shells had blown away half his bunker, directing his men with hand signals when the noise made voice commands impossible. The second assault came at noon. This time, the Germans brought everything. Tanks in overwhelming numbers, infantry in close support, aircraft providing continuous strikes. The battle raged for hours, a hellish crescendo of explosions, machine gun fire, and the screams of wounded men. The Polish line bent, bunkers fell, casualties mounted. But somehow, impossibly, the fortress held. September 9th dawned on a scene of devastation. Most of the Polish bunkers were damaged or destroyed. Casualties had reduced the garrison to barely 200 men. Ammunition was running low. Medical supplies were gone. The fortress looked like the surface of the moon, cratered and smoking. The surviving Poles were no longer the neat, uniformed soldiers who had marched into Wizna 3 days earlier. They were scarred, exhausted, and covered in concrete dust and blood. Some had been fighting continuously for 72 hours, snatching brief moments of sleep between German attacks. They had no food left, little water, and were down to their last magazines of ammunition. But Raganes was still there, still fighting, still refusing to surrender. The fortress radio crackled with German demands for surrender, broadcast in broken Polish and promising fair treatment for prisoners. Raganes responded each time with the same message: "Polish soldiers, do not surrender. Come and take us if you can." The final German assault came with the methodical precision of an execution. Heavy artillery systematically destroyed each remaining Polish position. Tank fire gutted the bunkers one by one. Aircraft strafed anything that moved. German engineers had spent the night preparing for this final push. They brought up flamethrowers to clear the bunkers, explosive charges to seal the tunnels, and enough firepower to level a city. This wasn't warfare anymore. This was extermination. As the last Polish machine gun fell silent, Raganes gathered his surviving men in the command bunker. Outside, they could hear German voices, German boots on the concrete, the sound of the enemy finally overrunning their positions. Less than 50 men remained of the original 720. They were wounded, exhausted, and out of ammunition. Some could barely stand. Others were already dying from their wounds. But they were still Polish soldiers, and they had never surrendered. "Poland will be free again," Raganes told his men. "Remember that. No matter what happens to us, Poland will be free." Rather than face capture, rather than give the Germans the satisfaction of his surrender, Captain Władysław Raganes made his final decision. He had prepared for this moment, stocking the command bunker with explosives in case the position became untenable. Now, with German soldiers literally at the door, he made the choice that would define his legend. He ordered his remaining men to evacuate the command bunker. Then, alone with his oath and his honor, he detonated the explosives. The explosion echoed across the Neru River valley like thunder. When the smoke cleared, the command bunker was gone. Raganes was gone, but his legend had just been born. When German engineers finally cleared the rubble and counted their losses, they found something that shook them to their core. This minor speed bump had cost them over 900 casualties and 3 precious days. 3 days that could have meant the difference between victory and disaster. The casualty figures told the story. In 3 days of fighting, the Germans had lost more men at Wizna than in some entire campaigns. Tank crews, elite infantry, artillery specialists, all casualties of a fortress that should have fallen in hours. Guderian's schedule, so carefully planned, was in ruins. His reputation for lightning warfare had been tarnished by a handful of Polish soldiers who refused to understand they were supposed to lose. More importantly, they had witnessed something that challenged everything they thought they knew about this war. They had seen what happened when good men chose death over dishonor, duty over survival. The German officers who found Raganes' body didn't desecrate it. They didn't strip it for souvenirs. Instead, they buried him with full military honors, a soldier's tribute to a soldier's courage. What do you think made these men fight so courageously against impossible odds? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to share this incredible story with someone who needs to hear about real heroism. The defense of Wizna became legend. Polish resistance fighters, carrying on the struggle through 6 years of occupation, drew inspiration from the 720 men who had faced 40,000 and refused to break. They proved that Poland's spirit couldn't be conquered, even when its armies fell. Throughout the war, resistance cells would invoke the name of Wizna when morale was low, when facing impossible odds in the Warsaw Ghetto uprising, when sabotaging German supply lines, when facing execution by firing squad. Polish patriots remembered that 720 men had once held a river crossing for 3 days against the entire German war machine. If they could do that, anything was possible. Captain Raganes was posthumously awarded the Virtuti Militari, Poland's highest military decoration, but his real monument wasn't a medal or a statue. It was the knowledge that when everything seemed lost, when the darkness seemed complete, ordinary men could still choose to become extraordinary. The strategic impact of Wizna extended far beyond the 3-day delay. Guderian's 9X Panzer Corps, bloodied and shaken, never again underestimated Polish resistance. The German High Command was forced to acknowledge that their easy victory was proving more costly than anticipated. Most importantly, The example of Wizna spread throughout Poland, inspiring other garrisons to fight longer and harder than anyone thought possible. Today, a memorial stands at Wizna, marking the spot where 720 Polish soldiers chose honor over life. Visitors come to pay their respects, to remember, and to ask themselves the same question that echoes across the centuries. When everything you love is threatened, when the odds are impossible, when survival demands surrender, what would you choose? The bells that toll at Wizna don't just mark the passing hours. They remind us that heroes aren't born from legends. They're forged from the choices ordinary people make in extraordinary moments. These weren't mythical warriors or legendary knights. They were teachers and farmers, mechanics and students, ordinary men who found themselves in an extraordinary situation and chose to become something more. Their sacrifice echoes through time, a reminder that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the decision to stand firm despite it. If these incredible stories of courage and sacrifice inspire you, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. History is filled with ordinary people who did extraordinary things, and their stories deserve to be told. What other forgotten heroes from history would you like to see featured? Let us know in the comments and help us keep these amazing stories alive for future generations.